What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Jordan Wheeler with RTR Vehicles, and in today's episode we're installing the RTR spare tire carrier for your 21 Plus Ford Bronco. Inside your box you'll find RTR tire carrier hoop, tire carrier base, tire carrier hub, upper and lower hinges, brake light housing, upper and lower brake light brackets, alignment plate, camera mount, a hardware pack that includes number 8 small pan head screws, cable ties, M8 hex head bolts, thick shims, camera retainer, thin washers, flathead bolts, thin shims, M12 large flange bolts, low profile plugs, M8 flange bolts, thick washers, carriage bolts, lock nuts, adjuster bracket, coaxial and 6-pin camera extension harness, number 10 large pan head screws, and high-strength ARP bolts. Tools needed for this installation are 10mm socket, 13mm socket, 16mm socket, 21mm socket, T10 Torx driver, T15 Torx driver, T20 Torx driver, T25 Torx driver, T30 Torx driver, T45 Torx driver, 5mm Allen socket, socket wrenches, extension, torque wrench, 13mm wrench, 16mm wrench, cutting pliers, grease pencil, body clip removal tool, and a Phillips head screwdriver. Before we get started with this video, a few things I want to point out. Not all cameras are the same. That's why we have included both a coaxial and a 6-pin connector extension for your camera. Choose which one best suits your application, and then you can discard the other. Each person's Bronco setup will also vary based on their tire size and the accessories they choose to add to it. Taillight mounting brackets can go either up or down, left or right, depending on your spare tire size. Also, to compensate for the weight of any spare tires or accessories that you may add, your angle to your striker may need to be adjusted. You may also need to use the provided shims, whether they're thick or thin, that were provided in this kit as well. Whatever your situation, make sure to read through the instructions in their entirety. Make sure to get some help where needed and take your time with this installation. Now, what do you say we get at it? With the vehicle parked on level ground and the spare tire removed, remove the 8 bolts securing the OEM tire carrier to the vehicle and set them aside. Using a Phillips head screwdriver, remove the rubber bumpers on the tailgate. Using a T30 Torx driver, remove the plastic fasteners in the insulation pad and remove the insulation from the tire carrier. Still using your T30 Torx driver, remove the 4 screws securing the 3rd brake light to the tire carrier, as well as remove the 2 screws on the face of the tire carrier. Remove the steel bracket and camera assembly from the tire carrier. Disconnect the camera harness from the camera assembly and set it aside. Then, using a T25 Torx driver, remove the 6 screws in the 3rd brake light housing. Separate the 2 halves of the housing to gain access to the light. Unhook and disconnect the wiring harness. Using the T25 Torx driver, remove the 2 screws in the brake light bracket and remove the bracket. Remove the brake light from the housing and set it aside. This light will be reused for the RTR tire carrier. Open the tailgate to expose the hinge cover, and using a Phillips head screwdriver, remove the 4 plastic rivets in the cover. Then, using a 10mm socket, remove the 2 screws in the hinge cover. You can now remove the hinge cover from the vehicle and set it aside. Supporting the bottom of the tailgate, while using a grease pencil or equivalent, mark the position of the upper and lower tailgate hinges on the vehicle. Using a 13mm socket, remove the 2 upper interior hinge bolts. Then use a T45 Torx driver to remove the 2 upper exterior hinge bolts. The OEM hinge and hardware will not be reused in this installation. The high-strength ARP bolts and thick washers will be used for mounting the inner hinge to the vehicle. The RTR upper and lower hinges have location-specific profiles. Match the inner hinge to the marking before installing the hinge. Leave the bolts snug at this time to allow for final adjustment. Install the RTR upper hinge onto the tailgate using the supplied M8 flange bolts, leaving these bolts snug for final adjustment as well. And then repeat this process for the lower hinge. Carefully close the tailgate. Check the tailgate to body alignment and adjust as necessary. leaving all hardware snug at this time to allow for final adjustment. Using 4 of the OEM tire carrier bolts, mount the alignment plate to the upper and lower hinges. Once proper positioning has been achieved, torque all 4 exterior hinge bolts to 30 pound-feet. You can now remove the OEM bolts and alignment plate. Insert the supplied low-profile plugs into the tailgate bumper holes. Partially install 2 of the supplied M8 hex head bolts with the oversized washers into the top 2 holes of the tailgate. Carefully lower the tire carrier hoop onto the hardware and into the RTR hinges. Loosely install the 6 remaining sets of hex head bolts and washers into the tire carrier. Using a 5mm Allen socket, carefully install the flat head bolts through the hoop arms and onto the RTR hinges. Then torque all of the tire carrier bolts to 30 pound-feet. Feed the camera and brake harnesses through the opening on the side of the tire carrier. Feed the camera harness out through the front of the tire carrier and the brake light harness out through the top. Feed the camera extension harness in through the bottom of the carrier base. Mount the carrier base using the M12 large flange bolts and torque the bolts to 45 pound-feet. Select the appropriate camera extension harness, coaxial or 6-pin, for the application and connect it to the OEM harness. Discard the unused harness extension as it will not be used. Slide the adjuster bracket into the carrier hub with the weld nuts on the bracket aligned with the slots in the hub. Feed the extension harness through the hub and slide the hub into the base. Thread 2 of the M12 flange nuts into the adjuster bracket, leaving the bolts snug for now. Transfer the OEM camera into the RTR camera mount and secure it using the supplied retainer and one of the number 10 large pan head screws. Connect the extension harness to the OEM camera. Carefully insert the camera and mount assembly into the snout of the hub and secure it using the 2 remaining number 10 pan head screws. Using a pair of cutting pliers, carefully trim off the center post of the back of the OEM brake light. You can then place the OEM brake light into the RTR brake light housing. If you purchase the RTR high lift jack mount as well, you can skip this next step as you will be using the included brake light bracket from that kit. Set the RTR upper brake light bracket onto the OEM light and housing. Use the 2 number 8 small pan head screws to secure the assembly and do not over tighten. Mount the lower brake light bracket to the tire carrier using 2 large flange bolts, torquing the bolts to 45 pound-feet. Join the 2 brake light brackets together using the 2 carriage bolts and lock nuts. Reconnect the harness to the brake light. Secure the wire harness to the upper brake light bracket using the supplied cable tie and trim the access length. Torque the lock nuts to 14 pound-feet. Torque the 4 inner hinge bolts to 40 pound-feet. Reinstall the OEM hinge cover, torquing the bolts to 40 pound-feet. The Bronco RTR tire carrier is also designed to work with the available accessories on RTRvehicles.com, like the RTR high lift jack mount, which installs directly onto the RTR spare tire carrier. Its strong, toolless, rigid design limits jack movement, and when installed, this jack mount sits flush and secure to the vehicle's body. You also have the option of the RTR Molly accessory plate. The accessory plate features recessed fasteners for unobstructed mounting surface and rust-free all-aluminum construction, and can easily support such accessories as the RTR jerry can mount.
If you want to check out any of these products, make sure to click the link down below in the description to head over to RTRvehicles.com to check them out. While you're there, check out our gear and any other products that we have available for Bronco, Bronco Sport, Ranger, and F-150. Also, while you're down there by that description, go ahead and click that like button. Let us know how you feel about the video with a comment down below. And hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss anything coming up from myself or any of the other team members here on RTR Vehicles. Thank you for tuning in once again. I am Jordan Wheeler with RTR Vehicles, and I'll catch you on the other side of fun.